In 1939, Poland fought a German army with far greater numbers, held out a full week longer than any German plan accounted for, and did it while fielding a handful of weapons that were in real terms ahead of their time.
Outdated on paper, not outdated everywhere. PZL P-11. On paper, the PZL P-11 was already obsolete by 1939, a high-wing fighter built to a design standard from years earlier. Polish pilots flew it against newer German Bf-109s and Bf-110s anyway, and confirmed kills came out of those fights, because pilot skill and knowledge of home terrain closed some of the gap the aircraft itself couldn't. PZL-37 Loesch. When it entered service, the PZL-37 Loesch stood among the most modern medium bombers on Earth, faster and carrying a heavier bomb load than many Western equivalents. Because commanders had already dispersed the fleet onto remote grass airstrips instead of leaving it on the main bases, most survived the opening days of the German assault and kept hitting armored columns for over a week before the survivors flew out to Romania. PZL-23 Kadash. Built as a reconnaissance and light bomber aircraft, the PZL-23 Kadash ended up flying missions against armored columns it was never designed for. Its low speed made it easy prey for German fighters, but crews kept flying the same dangerous low-level attacks day after day anyway, because nothing better existed in numbers large enough to replace it. RWD-8. Originally a civilian trainer, the RWD-8 got pressed into service in 1939 as a liaison and courier aircraft, slow, unarmed, and valuable exactly for that reason. It could carry orders and messages between cut-off units once phone lines went down, and larger aircraft were too valuable to risk on the job. PZL-46 Sum. Designed as a light bomber for the Polish Air Force, the PZL-46 Sum never got past a handful of pre-production examples. War preparations simply outran the production line, leaving an aircraft that was fully designed on paper but never reached Polish squadrons in any meaningful number. Karabin Lotniczy VZ-37. Built for the flexible defensive mounts on Polish aircraft, the Karabin Lotniczy VZ-37 machine gun fired at well over 1,000 rounds per minute, an impressive rate for its era, though it counted for little once the aircraft it was mounted on was already outmatched in every other respect.
Better built than the enemies, never built in enough numbers. The 7TP. The 7TP outclassed the German Panzer I and Panzer II in almost every meaningful way. Better armored, carrying a real 37mm gun instead of just machine guns, and running on a more dependable diesel engine. Its gun-lock periscope was even a world first later copied by other nations. Only 132 were ever built, which is exactly why that technical edge barely registered in September 1939. The TKS. Barely bigger than a car, the TKS tankette was meant for reconnaissance, but in the war's final days, many were fitted with improvised mounts for anti-tank rifles, because Polish commanders were converting every available vehicle into something that could still be pointed at a German tank. The TK3, the predecessor to the TKS, formed the backbone of Polish tank reconnaissance. Light, agile, but armored that barely stopped rifle fire, let alone the anti-tank guns these vehicles ran into in large numbers by September 1939. The 10TP, a modern cruiser tank prototype riding on a Christie suspension and an American engine. The 10TP existed in 1939 as exactly one completed example, a design promising enough to theoretically match Western tanks of the era, but one that never got past trials before the war shut down any further development. The C7P. Built on the same chassis as the 7TP, the C7P artillery tractor hauled heavy guns across ground wheeled vehicles couldn't cross. After the defeat, captured examples ended up in both German and Soviet service, still towing artillery just for whichever side had captured them. The Vickers E. Built under British license, the Vickers E provided the technical foundation Poland later built its own 7TP from, an imported vehicle that doubled as both a starting point and a direct predecessor to Poland's own tank program.
Some of these, Poland's own soldiers weren't even allowed to know by name. Karabinek Zu-29. Poland's standard rifle, the Karabinek Zu-29, was a shortened version of the German Mauser system adapted to Polish needs, dependable and rugged, but no technical surprise since the underlying design was already decades old by the time Polish soldiers carried it into 1939. Zu-35R. The Zu-35 anti-tank rifle was kept so secret that Poland's own soldiers weren't told what they were carrying. Crates were stamped "Do not open, surveying equipment for Uruguay," a cover story convincing enough that it gave the weapon its nickname, Ur. At 100 meters, it could genuinely punch through German tank armor, but that same secrecy became the weapon's own problem. Some units got theirs only days before the invasion, and others never received one at all because too few people had been told it existed to actually distribute it in time. This Zu-35, the Polish-designed self-loading pistol, was considered one of the best service pistols of its era, good enough that the German occupation authorities kept manufacturing it under their own designation after 1939, though build quality dropped steadily the longer the war dragged on. CKM Zu-30, a Polish licensed version of the American Browning system, the CKM Zu-30 served as the heavy machine gun in nearly every Polish infantry unit. Reliable under sustained fire, but heavy enough that it usually took several soldiers to move, at the cost of being able to reposition quickly. Granatnik Zu-36. The Granatnik Zu-36, a light mortar meant for platoon-level use, gave Polish units indirect fire support without waiting on heavier artillery. A small capability that mattered more than its size suggested whenever the real guns were still kilometers away getting into position. A small fleet that still produced one of the most dramatic escapes of the entire war. ORP Orzel. The submarine ORP Orzel sat interned in Tallinn, Estonia in September 1939, disarmed and without navigation charts after Estonian authorities gave in to German pressure. In a single night, the crew secretly sabotaged their own torpedo hoist to keep the weapons aboard, measured the harbor depth under cover of a fake fishing trip, and slipped away through fog under fire, taking 2 Estonian guards hostage, then setting them ashore near Sweden with money and clothes, on the reasoning that anyone returning from the underworld deserves to travel first class. The submarine eventually reached Britain and kept fighting under her own flag. ORP Grom. The destroyer ORP Grom, one of the Polish Navy's most modern warships, was ordered to Britain before the war even formally began. Part of the fleet was meant to survive outside the Baltic if the worst happened, while the rest defended the coast for as long as it could. ORP Wicher. The destroyer ORP Wicher stayed behind on the Polish coast and fought one of the war's first direct naval engagements against German warships, smaller and less heavily armed than her opponents, but built for exactly this job, holding the line as long as physically possible. ORP Błyskawica. Sister ship to the Grom, the destroyer ORP Błyskawica survived the entire war in British service and even helped defend her own home shipyard town of Cows from a German air raid using her own anti-aircraft guns. Today, she sits as a museum ship in Poland, the only ship of her class to survive the war intact. ORP Wilk. The submarine ORP Wilk broke through the German Baltic blockade in 1939 and reached British waters much like the Orzel did. It was Wilk's successful radio report of that breakthrough that gave the Orzel's own crew the confidence to attempt their far riskier escape.
By the end, holding a position mattered more than which weapon held it. 40mm WZ-36 Bofors. A Polish-built version of the Swedish Bofors, the 40mm WZ-36 anti-aircraft cannon engaged low-flying German dive bombers at a rate of fire that gave real hit chances even against fast-moving targets, one of the few Polish weapons that stood on genuinely equal technical footing with its German counterpart, Armata WZ-1897. Originally a French design from the First World War, the WZ-1897 field gun still made up a significant share of Polish field artillery despite its age, not because it was modern, but because 20 years of independence simply hadn't been enough time to replace every older piece in the inventory. Haubitsa WZ-1914-19. A modernized Austrian design dating back to the First World War, the WZ-1914-19 field howitzer covered the medium-caliber gap in Polish artillery.
a gun that spanned 2 world wars simply by being repeatedly repaired and kept in service between them. The Westerplatte defenses. Poland's small garrison at Westerplatte held its fortified positions for 7 days against German naval guns and a far larger attacking force, an outcome German planning had budgeted only a few hours for, before the actual defense outran that estimate roughly tenfold. Polish cavalry equipment. Polish cavalry really did carry lance and saber into the field in 1939, but as fast, mobile reconnaissance troops who mostly fought dismounted with rifles, not as horsemen charging tanks the way the later legend claims. That legend grew largely out of a single misreported engagement that German propaganda then spread as proof of Polish backwardness. Karabin WZ-98A. An older Mauser variant built under Polish license, the Karabin WZ-98A supplemented the newer WZ-29 in reserve units and border guard formations, a rifle older than its official successor but still reliable enough to stay in service through the final day of fighting. The Wiese pistol kept getting built under a German name for years after Poland fell. Some ideas outlast the army that invented them.